Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today is June 3rd, Saturday. Okay, so welcome for our third section on the Zhuang Zi, the Taoism reading. We have 7 chapters, and today we are reading chapter 3. As usual, let me introduce our schedule. So the schedule we have today is we're reading Zhuang Zi's inner chapter, chapter 3, Cultivation of Life. And then next week, next Saturday, we're going to continue on Bhagavad Gita review. And I already posted 2 videos about the Aurobindo. I watched both of them. It's pretty good, you know, especially for the interview. And we are going to discuss that video. And SK Sashi will host it for next week. And then the week after, and I'm going to kind of change, put the Zhuang Zi reading on hold for 1 week, because I think that's important to introduce another philosopher, Gong Sun Long, and he being considered as an ancient Chinese logician. People are not in Chinese culture probably not pay much attention to him, but he has been reviewed by many Western philosophers because he is represent the we will consider as a logician. And then Zhuang Zi mentioned about this school many times in his writing. And then we will continue on chapter 4, chapter 5, and going forward. So that's the schedule. So that's just a brief introduction. We have been through the reading of the history of brief history of Chinese philosophy by the author Feng You Lan. Okay, and then right now, before I go through the history of Chinese philosophy, I'm going to read. We are going to focus on this book about his translation commentary of Zhuang Zi. Okay. So just brief introduction about Zhuang Zi on the chapter. Okay, so today we focus on chapter 3. The inner section has 7 chapters. So today we focus on the chapter 3, which is so-called the fundamentals for the cultivation of life. Chinese called Yang Sheng Zu. So let me see, can you see? Okay, so let me do this way. Okay, first I will briefly talk about Lao Tzu, and I will assume people being in this section for a while probably know who is Lao Tzu. And then I have a section, I think last year and 2 years ago, we read Lao Tzu, okay, Dao De Jing, that we consider as the first Taoism text. Okay, if you are not familiar with Chinese philosophy, 2 major schools. One is Confucianism, another one is Taoism. And the Confucianism, we will consider Confucius is the, well, we should say founder or the godfather or the first one. And then Taoism basics is Lao Tzu. Okay, he is lived in 6th century BC, and then considered as the founder of the Taoism. And there's a simple text called Dao De Jing, and then one day we will introduce this one. And today, the focus on the Dao De Jing is talking about Dao, okay, nature, order, or balance. And the key concept of learning is Wu Wei, or so-called non-action. But today we are not going to talk about this person, okay, or this book. But the reason I bring up this one for 2 reasons. Number one, he is the founder of Taoism, and then Zhuang Zi we are reading today, you can see as the second one. We should not call him as a disciple. He's 300 years after him, but a lot of Zhuang Zi's philosophy is kind of considered as a continue of further explanation of Lao Tzu's philosophy. So that's the first reason. Second reason is today's reading in the book mentioned about Lao Tzu. So I think that would be better to give a brief introduction of Lao Tzu before we read the text. So we will have some basic understanding today's reading. So let me see. So today we are reading Zhuang Zi. As a tradition in ancient Chinese, when you see the name Zi, okay, so Zhuang Zi means Mr. Zhuang, okay, so it also means the book he wrote. So when I say Zhuang Zi, it could mean three things. It could mean Zhuang Zi, Mr. Zhuang, or could be the book he wrote, or could be means Mr. Zhuang's philosophy. So all three are in the same name. Okay, so that's the ancient Chinese tradition. Okay, so usually in the writing, if I separate, put a space, I mean the person. If I put together, I mean the book, just like here. Okay, here I put the Zhuang Zi together, I mean the book. So, and when I say it, I will say Zhuang Zi. So depend on how I say it, and then it could be means the person, or could be means the book. Okay, Mark.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm curious about, does the Zhuang Tzu mention Lao Tzu and or the Tao Te Ching, and is that why they're associated, or are they associated together because Sima Qian classified them together when he classified philosophies, or is there some other reason?
Okay, very good question. Thank you very much to give me a chance to explain this one. Lao Tzu is kind of older than Confucius. So Confucius also, according to legendary, Confucius has visited Lao Tzu once, but we don't know if it's true or not true. And then Zhuang Zi in the book mentioned about Lao Tzu, especially, and in today's chapter, he mentioned about Lao Tzu, but he never met Lao Tzu because he is 300 years before, after him. And then I don't see Zhuang Zi consider himself as disciple. I mean, in the sense of St. Paul to Jesus, or like Mencius consider himself a disciple. Even Mencius is 150 years later than Confucius. Mencius will consider himself continue from Confucius' teaching. But Zhuang Zi doesn't have this kind of writing in his book. But the reason we consider him as Taoism, because Zhuang Zi's thought, Zhuang Zi's philosophy is very similar to Lao Tzu, but with a close read, you will find out it's different, a little bit different. Depending on how you read it, some people will say, oh, that's very different. So, okay, that's my answer about the relationship about Zhuang Zi. And today's writing on chapter 3, he mentioned about the death of Lao Tzu. But of course, we don't believe that's a true story. It's a legendary. Okay, Zhuang Zi like to create his own story, and we have no reason to believe all these stories are true. And I will say, all the stories are not true. So, CK, please.
Yes, Jason, I'm just making a comment on what you said about Zi in ancient Chinese. I think it's more than Mr. It is an honorific reserved for distinguished people. So it should be called the distinguished Zhuang Zhou, or the honorable,
yeah, we can call master, right? Master is another way to translate.
Exactly. So I mean, most people won't get this Zi attached to their names because they're not important enough.
Yeah,
so,
that's
yeah. I just thought I'll mention that.
Yeah. Thank you. So, any other question, comment? So a little bit about the book. I show this page every time, and the basic Zhuang Zi is the original writing, and then let me see. Okay, before that, we will see Zhuang Zi in this book, right? It's if you consider a book. I have a book here, right? So Chinese. Okay, so usually I have 33 chapters, and then the first 7 chapters, 1 to 7, we consider as the inner chapter. And according to tradition, it's written by Zhuang Zi. Second part, from chapter 8 to 22, we call outer chapters, and which will be considered as by his disciples. Okay. 23 to 33 were considered miscellaneous chapter, and which we don't know who wrote it, but could be people in the later time added on that. Okay, but that's just the tradition. But of course, they have a scholar and work their full academic life to figure out who wrote what. But that's not my interest here. So my job in this, not only this section, this series, I want to introduce is inner chapter. And the inner chapter, we have a few commentaries. Traditionally, the most important commentary is by Guo Xiang. So he translates, not translate, he put a lot of commentary. And of course, in ancient Chinese. Guo Xiang lived on the 3rd century, and who about 500 years after Zhuang Zi. And then the English version I use as Feng You Lan. Feng You Lan is a 20th century Chinese scholar, and he studied with I think Jiang Dui in Colombia, and then he do a lot of translation. And for these 2 years, I have been reading his history of Chinese philosophy. I start to know his importance and his view on Chinese philosophy, because he has the Western training in philosophy. So his understanding, by cultural understanding, is very interesting. That's why I would like to use his translation for the book. So up to this point, because today's chapter is shorter, so I would like to give this 7 chapter, inner chapter, a brief overview. So you will see this 7 chapter. According to most scholars, people consider this 7 chapter as a complete Zhuang Zi philosophy. It's a complete philosophical system. And I didn't get it for a long time. Until this time, I start to, because the meetup, I start to read the 7 in the short time, okay, because it's very long, a lot of writing. So before I read it, it takes me probably years, okay, some on and off. So I don't get this sense. But this time, because I prepare for the meetup, I start to realize, it's true. This 7 chapter actually create a complete philosophical system. So before I start, is any question, comment? Okay, so since today we don't have a lot of people, so if you have a question, just raise your hand, and then I will stop for your comment or your question. Okay, so we already talked about first 2 chapters of happy excursion and equality of things. So the first chapter basically we can call it is a series of realm. Okay, realm. Okay, so basics talking about, if you remember or you have heard about this chapter, it's very important. Talk about the big bird, talk about small bird, and the fish transform to bird. Okay, and then all this kind of story. Okay, a lot of strange story basics. Zhuang Zi want to tell you is what we can achieve. Okay, we live in this world, he just lifted your imagination to a different level. Okay, that's his first test. Doing that, we call it a happy excursion. Okay, give you an ideal world. Chapter 2, actually, we spent 2 weeks on that. This one is the most difficult part of Zhuang Zi's writing. It's very long, and then it's a lot of conversation, we call it dialogue. They have a full dialogue and a dream. The famous Zhuang Zi's butterfly dream is in this chapter. Okay. So basics, it cover the metaphysics, about the truth and the falsehood, talk about reality or illusion, being, non-being. How about this world? He constructs this world, okay, in the not only human world, this world and other world. So that's the foundation we can consider it's his metaphysics work on the chapter 2. So with these two foundations, today we are going to talk about is cultivation of life. So basics, he want to answer, actually for the following 5 chapters, he want to answer the question from chapter 2. Okay, so chapter 3, which today we are going to detail, is we are going to talk about how do we live as individual. All right, so as you as a person, you could be a farmer, could be a general, could be a soldier, could be king, could be a nobleman, and how are you going to live in this world? Okay, so that's today's subject, which is chapter 3. And chapter 4, basically, we can consider it's a social philosophy. Okay, the title is the human world, because doesn't matter what the ideal world is, we all live in this secular world. So how we're going to live here? So basics, the key about the usefulness and he called usefulness of uselessness. Okay, so that's his concept. So that's his idea. We are going to introduce it 2-3 weeks. Okay, on the chapter 4, how I'm going to live in this world. And the chapter 5 is his moral theory. Okay, he talked about morality. Okay, so the key word I bring up here, he talked about the perfect innate character, but unmanifested virtue. So his virtue is very similar to Greek concept of virtue, so-called arete. Okay, excellency. Okay, so but different than Confucian teaching. He doesn't want your virtue being shown out. You want to hide it. Okay, so that's his Zhuang Zi's concept of virtue, which we will talk about in chapter 5. And the chapter 6 is the most strange part or difficult part. We can call it religious part. Basically, he's talking about the mysticism, okay, mystical experience. And he talked about the other world, okay. He talked about the spiritual man, talk about immortality, talk about the death, okay. So when I reread this part, I start to understand better on the so-called religious Taoism. Okay, I grew up in Taiwan, and Taiwan has been popular in the religious Taoism. And then I start to realize a lot of religious practice, as you can find the source on this chapter. In another word, you know, if you are reading the whole book as a religious book, okay, just like if you want to read Bible as a religious book. So this chapter will become the important, the focus part that you want to focus on. So that's his religious, and which is very different than the Christian Judaism religion. Okay, probably will be more similar to Hinduism, the Brahman, this kind of concept. Right? And finally, to chapter 7, it's talk about his positive idea. So if you read the Confucius, you probably know a lot of time Confucius like to talk about the ancient sage king. Okay, so that's the way Zhuang Zi is talking about the politics, but he's talking about Taoism sage king and the concept of Wu Wei. And back to Mark's question, how does Zhuang Zi related to Lao Tzu? Okay, because the concept of Wu Wei as a practical practice, political practice, had been mentioned in chapter 7. So if you look at this 7 inner chapter, you will see it kind of very complete philosophical system in this one. So most of the people probably read Zhuang Zi as a bunch of dialogue, a lot of essay, a lot of interesting story. Like today we will talk about skillful cook, or you want to call the Cook Ting story. And the last time we talked about the butterfly dream. And the first week we talk about the big bird. Okay, all this story, people may see Zhuang Zi has a bunch of interesting story, let us think. But in another way, if you look at this 7 chapters together, you will see actually it's a comprehensive philosophical system in this way. Yeah, thank you. Mark, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So when you're talking about the concept of virtue in Zhuang Zi, is that the same? Is that concept expressed with the same character day as in the Tao Te Ching, or is that formulated in a different way?
It's the same. It's the same word, and then they all remember Dao De Jing in Chinese word. If you recognize Chinese word called De, okay, the pronunciation is De. Oh, okay. Usually we translate as just 1 minute. Okay. Usually we translate as virtue, right? But I realize probably proper way translate, because virtue doesn't have a powerful part, the power, the energy part. So probably closer to Greek arete, okay, it's probably more close than this sense. But when Confucius mentioned about this word, De, it's different, have a different meaning on that. So I hope, Mark, I answered your question.
Oh yeah, that was great. Thanks.
Okay, so any question before I move to next page? If you have the question, because this one is the way I will not do this every week, okay? Because today's session is much shorter, okay? So I give me a chance to talk about the entire inner section. So if you have a question, any comment, and then please, yeah. So no one have a question? Okay, so if no question, and then if you have a question later, please raise your hand. So I will, before like this, I will talk about quickly, Trevor, please.
I do have a question, and it relates to the reading. Sorry, I was getting an orange in the kitchen, but it can wait. In the reading for today, the translator talks about emotion,
Yeah.
And this was on page 23. And so I have a question about that, but if we're going to get to it later, I can hold off.
Yeah, I will talk about this later, because I think that's very interesting, very important, and he's related to Spinoza. And then before I read it, I think about Spinoza, and I'm quite happy, you know, when I read this translator and he talk about Spinoza. Yeah, okay, so I didn't. So, and I also like to mention Nietzsche. Okay, okay, so just for a while, and I hope you will connect. Because I read Zhuang Zi, okay, this book since I was very young. Okay, I read it, and of course it's difficult reading, but usually you read the first chapter. And when I come to American, I read Nietzsche, okay, especially last book, Zarathustra. Okay, I find out that they are very similar. And I'm not going to talk about I'm not talking about their philosophy are similar. I'm talking about their style of philosophizing are very similar. Like in Zarathustra, right? He talked about Zarathustra live solitated in the mountain for 10 years and going down to the town, molly cow, and he tried to talk about overman, or you want to call it the Superman or Ubermensch. Okay, so then he talked about the God is dead, and then he talked to animal. He meet a lot of people, you know, blah blah blah. There's all kind of, you can say, interesting or funny or unrelated story all piled up together. And the Nietzsche's writing actually is quite beautiful. Same as Zhuang Zi, I do see the same style of writing. Okay, so one in Chinese, one in German, but you know, I see that's a wonderful similarity here. Only thing, another thing I see Nietzsche, his goal, okay, is kind of against anti-Christian, talk about anti-Christian. And then when you read Zhuang Zi, same thing, you can see Zhuang Zi as anti-Confucianism. So that's the part I see they are related. So that's why I bring up the Nietzsche, especially if you are in the first chapter, the happy excursion, in the story, you know, Zhuang Zi, I separate this chapter to 3 parts, right? First part, he talked about 3 stories: the big bird, Peng, okay, and talk about the small birds, and the small animal, right? The young dove and the cicada, and then he bring the argument, the big and the small. And the second part of chapter 1, he bring up the 4 story, okay, and 4 legendary people, okay. So basically, he want to talk about is this world and the other world. And finally, the last part, he talk about bring up the conversation, okay. He want to talk between Zhuang Zi and Hui Zi, okay. Hui Zi belong to the school of name, and next time I'm going to introduce is this school, okay. So third part, talk about the usefulness and the uselessness. So if you look at the chapter one, right? Zhuang Zi is talking about the big and the small, this world and other world, and the usefulness and the uselessness. Okay, talk about these 3. Then we move to chapter 2. Zhuang Zi, the writing start to change. This one become like 4 dialogue, and end with a butterfly dream. So since chapter 1, Zhuang Zi talk about many different big, small, usefulness and uselessness, and this world and the other world. Here he tried to bring another concept of this world. They all the same. I should not use the same. They say equality. They are equal, and the equal in a sense, not same height, okay, but equal in a sense, it's no difference, this kind of equal. So that's why this chapter is very important. So basically talking about the truth, every truth and the false is no difference, and the reality and illusion has no difference, noble or base, no difference, life, death, beautiful, ugly, there's no difference in Zhuang Zi's view. And then eventually he bring the concept of this world as, we shall call it the deterministic world or spontaneous world. In other words, we don't have enough power to change this world. Okay, so, and end with butterfly dream. Okay, I think that's a very simple story. Okay, Zhuang Zi has a dream as a butterfly, and when he woke up and he got confused, he didn't know he was a man dream about butterfly, or he actually was a butterfly and dreamed about man now. So that's a story, and then Zhuang Zi just want to bring up the concept of this world. Okay, so right now for the next 5 chapters, okay, they all want to answer this question is, how are we going to live in this kind of world? So as I mentioned, chapter 3 is a very simple chapter. It's only have, if you read the text, only have 3 pages. So basics, chapter 3 is going to tell you is, how am I going to live as an individual in this world? All right. So the name of the chapter is Cultivation of Life. Okay. And this chapter is very simple. Okay. I separate us on the first one, give you an argument, give you advices. Okay, 3 advices. And the end with a short line talking about immortality, okay, of this world. In between, okay, Zhuang Zi put 4 short stories, okay, and the most famous one is the first one, the story of a skillful cook, okay. So that's very simple structure. So before I move on, and then I will pause for if you have a question or comment, please. Any comment or question before we move on? CK, please.
I think this is probably the most important chapter, in my opinion, because how to live one's life is probably the most important thing.
Okay, thank you for your opinion, but I just as I meant, so you think that's the most important for this chapter?
I think it is most important of all of Zhuang Tzu's chapters.
I would not against you, but I believe some religious person, when they practice religious style, they are pursuing immortality. They probably will say chapter 6 is the most important.
Yes, I understand that, but for mundane human beings like me, I think it's number 3.
That's part I agree with you. If you are not interested in political, you are not interested in mortality, and you just want to live a happy life, probably number 3 is pretty good. Yeah. And the plus is very short, so you don't have to spend too much time to read. Joe, please.
So are there any specific practices that go into, I mean, I understand the skillful cook story, but are there any specific practices that go into cultivating virtue? So for example, like the pursuit of wisdom would be something, and how you would pursue wisdom in practical ways is understanding yourself, but also understanding cause and effect, like physics as well. So you would have physics, you'd have logic, you would have ethics involved. So is there, I mean, when I think about cultivating skill, and I understand the importance of doing that, and I understand they talk about the limits of knowledge, but is there anything specific as to how to do that?
Okay, thank you. I think, this chapter, my answer would be yes. Okay, but I'm not sure other people's answer, because I just recently agree on this answer. If you ask me, let's say 3 months ago, I probably would say no, it only give you some principle. All right. And then today, my answer will say yes, but really up to you, how you're going to decide. Some people will say, oh, it's very practical, I can follow to do it. For example, in chapter 6 about religious, some people will say, okay, that's Zhuang Zi set the goal. We can do something, to reach immortality or, enhance our spirituality. Okay, I'm talking about chapter 6. Okay, but on that part, but really up to you how you're going to read it. And here, I will going to present is number 1, Zhuang Zi's original text. Number 2, Guo Xiang's interpretation. Number 3, Feng You Lan's as a commentary. Okay. Number 4, my own interpretation here. And of course, everyone read this one or listen to this one, you will have your own interpretation. Just like CK said, he thinks this chapter is the most important for him or for most of people. Yeah. So I think that's the way we read it. Travel, please.
And I wonder too if the answer to Joseph's question isn't in the opening paragraph, where he has this really short sentence about pursuing the middle course. It's just so simple, but it's really profound. It reminds me of what Marcus Aurelius says in his Meditations. He says something very similar. It's so simple, but it's so hard to practice.
Thank you, Trevor. I think that probably comes with the same understanding as you are talking about. Okay. And then I believe you read is Feng You Lan's translation. And I don't see he say that, but yeah. Okay, so we'll go there. But anyway, I'm going to this page. So the first part only had 3 sentences in Chinese, very short. And to me, I take these 3 one as most important sentence. I memorize. I don't have a good memory to memorize the ancient text, but these 3 lines I remember. Okay, and because it become my maxim. Okay, I remind myself. Okay, by these 3 lines. So probably I have to agree with CK. This one is the most important for a person. So, and actually these 3 advice, I take it seriously. Okay, so I remember these 3 and remind myself. You may disagree. Okay, you may. And so I will spend some time to explain these 3. I explain these 2 first. Then number 3 we will talk about a little bit later. Let's talk about first 3. Number 1. There is a limit to our life, but to knowledge, there is no limit. With what is limited to pursue, or what is limited means our life, to pursue what is unlimited, okay, to pursue the knowledge is a perilous thing. When knowing this, we still seek to increase our knowledge. The perils cannot be averted. Okay. So this one, I don't know your understanding on this one. My understanding is not become ignorant and not study, but when you study, pursuing knowledge, always remind myself, there's unlimited to pursue this knowledge. You can dive in doing the artificial intelligence, you can study philosophy all your life, even you can study Stoicism for your life. Okay, so you can do whatever, but always remind me, all right, there's unlimited to pursue, but my life is limited. So this one put in the opposite to Confucius' teaching. In Confucius' teaching, basics Confucius want us, Confucian scholar basics are perfectionist, right? So they looking for the summum bonum, right? Until the perfect, the highest good. And Zhuang Zi doesn't have this concept. Okay, he just to some extent. Okay, I don't see Zhuang Zi said you want to become ignorant, you don't have to study. I don't see he do this way. Just according to your ability, to a certain way, you should stop. It's unlimited way to go. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, I think it's controversial, but I think that's very important. He said, in doing what convention consider as good, it should fail. In doing what convention consider as bad, escape disgrace or penalty. I think the translator Feng You Lan insert what convention consider as good. If you read it in Chinese, probably more radical. You talk about 为善无尽名，为恶无尽行. If you want to direct translate, is doing the good thing, avoid the fate. Doing the bad thing, avoid the punishment. It sounds radical, but my understanding is kind of Nietzsche's beyond good and evil, but Nietzsche's beyond good and evil is like above good and evil. And if I have to translate, I will say Zhuang Zi talk about between good and evil. Forget about traditional, conventional good or bad. Okay, make your own judgment and based on the situation. But the key point, when you do good thing, you should avoid to get the fate. When you do bad thing, what so-called conventional bad thing, you should avoid the punishment. So that's the way. And one example is if you are super, super hungry and or you feel like I'm going to die. I have no money, but you see some food belong to other people. As long as not get caught, probably it's fine to take it, right? And I'm a marathon runner, and if you run marathon, you know, for a few hours, sometimes you need to pee. Okay, it's not right to pee on the street, but sometimes, people do that as long as not too disgraceful. We do it. So I think that's the idea. I read it, but of course, you can say I totally disagree, or say that's up to you. But I just like to share what I read on these two advice. Mark, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So I'm really glad that I came to this because I read this, in preparation a couple days ago, and these first couple of points that you've made, the profundity of them, like, was really lost on me, and your interpretation has really helped it sink in a lot better. Like, I want to go back to the first one you mentioned about the pursuing your life being limited and knowledge being unlimited, and to pursue what is unlimited with what is limited is perilous. So in general, like, I haven't been really I haven't read the whole thing, but I haven't been as impressed with the Zhuang Zi as I was with the Tao Te Ching. But this particular sentence seems very similar to me. That in the Tao Te Ching, there's a lot of emphasis on simplicity and forgetting knowledge. And it reminds me a lot of one who knows he has enough is wealthy. Seeing like one's satisfaction in like a sense of appreciation of what is and being in a state of status with what is, as opposed to constantly striving for something else, for status or something. So in that sense, that particular one, especially the way you formulate it, seems super congruent with the Tao Te Ching to me, to my interpretation. So and then what was the second one that can you remind me what the second one you just got through talking about was?
The second one is talking about doing what convention considers as good.
Oh yes, right.
Yeah.
So that also reminds me a lot of this idea, which in my impression of studying philosophy, studying both Chinese philosophy and non-Chinese philosophy, seems to be pretty particular to Chinese philosophy and really emphasize, which is the idea of balance. Like in the Manichaean kind of philosophical traditions of the West, there's this idea of superiority and inferiority and good versus evil. But like, in the I Ching, you have this idea of yin and yang, and this idea of balance as being like kind of the ideal, the practical. You combine this with that. So when seeking the good, avoid the bad. When seeking the bad, avoid the good. So there's not kind of like this overall sense of judgment, like, oh, knowledge is good, ignorance is bad, ignorance is good, knowledge is bad. No, you combine them in this kind of like harmonious way. Seems very, very Chinese to me, and it's something that I really appreciate. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for sharing. We have CK, Joe, and Travel. CK, please.
So, Jason, it's very nice to know that you are a marathon runner. I am also a marathon runner. I would like to share your example. last ran the marathon in Athens, and there were lots of marathon runners running the classic
So you
marathon.
run 2022?
No, I did it in 2019.
Oh, okay.
Athens marathon.
Okay.
So during the marathon, there were no toilets along the way. So
yeah,
I saw all kinds of men and women from different nationalities doing their business along the streets. And of course, it was disgraceful, and they still did it anyway because they needed to do it. So just sharing this interesting observation with you. And of course, I didn't do it, if you believe me.
yeah, but something you have to no choice, and really depend on what kind of what kind of thing you want to do, because to certain point you got to do something. So okay, anyway, that's a different subject. Thank you, CK, for sharing. Joe, please.
So yeah, I mean, point one actually makes a lot of sense in the sense that you're just actually pursuing wisdom, right? So I look at that as I try and break things down into principles. So that makes sense to me, and that's clear. The idea that fame ought to be avoided, and as well as you're talking about as far as a like kind of maintaining the balance between good and bad. I can see that, but again, I'm trying to think about what would the principle be, and I guess you could say it would be the middle way. But there's, in a way, I see that I've always found that very difficult to put into practice.
Okay.
In the sense that that's the question I kind of.
Yeah, I believe everyone.
How do you know?
Yeah, the second one, because you read in English, in Chinese even more radical. Okay, so because nothing mentioned about convention, so totally you can read as, I do good thing to avoid fame. That's fine, and I do bad thing as long as it's not being punished. So I can steal as long as I get caught. You can put this way. But I believe it's not this way. It takes a while to understand. Second, you talk about balance. That's Marx. Okay, Marx's understanding is balance, but I didn't say that. Okay, so
okay, yeah,
I'm not talking about its balance. I see that's in between, and then I find out the most close philosophy is Nietzsche. Okay, beyond good and evil. But Nietzsche talk about power. Okay, you use your power. That's my understanding. Will to power. But I think Zhuang Zi is not in this sense. He talk about like follow your nature and forget about conventional good or bad. But don't violate, because if you violate, for example, you do something, save the boy, sacrifice yourself to save, not really sacrifice you. You work very hard to save a boy, and the people start to praise you, really a hero. You should avoid it. Okay, but the bad thing, even something you think is bad, conventional thing is bad, but you think that you should do it for some reason. For example, steal some food for the hungry kids. Okay, you probably have to do. You can do it. But if you will get caught, then you should not do it. So because you will get punished. Something like this, like Robin Hood, right? So you rob the rich and to help the poor, but you should make sure you don't get caught. I think that's right. But of course, there's many ways to understanding this.
Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, it's based on reason more than anything else. Rather than a set of principles, because there'd be some conflict to a certain degree. It's as far, if you're going to call it a virtue ethic per se.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if Zhuang Zi means virtue or means based on reason or based on your feeling or based on your nature. I don't know. Okay, so I think that's the vagueness of this text, but also that's the interesting part of reading this one, because you can, for me, I just remember this one for many, many years. And through the different stage of life, I be honest, I become more appreciate this saying, okay, this word, okay. But is that based on reason or based on my nature because I understand myself better, or I just become a better person? So, you know, I have a different understanding. I don't know, but I think that's, I just like to share is, I think personally, these three sentences is important, and these three sentences have been with me for many years. Okay, so I don't think I'm a bad person. I don't see I do a bad thing. Okay, but definitely I'm not traditional called virtuous example. Okay, I know I'm not. Okay, so that's me. It's no, I don't want to be like Jason. That's fine. That's your choice. But I think everyone can have your own interpretation. Trevor, please.
Yeah, I have a different way of reading those lines. They may well be wrong. But I want to share them anyway. And I want to kind of loop in what Madeline has said in the chat as a way of doing it. She says the tall poppy gets its head caught up. And I think, though, that in this chapter, we have a tall poppy, right? And that's Qin Shi, and the way that he mourns Lao Tzu. Right? He doesn't do what everyone else does. And so I do think that this chapter is, in fact, about perhaps being a tall poppy or being a short poppy or just being whatever poppy you are. And so for me, I'm thinking about those sentences about doing good, and I'm going to cut out that middle part, but doing good, but not focusing on fame, and doing bad and escaping disgrace. I'm going to skip the penalty because I don't know what to do with that. I'm just being sincere. But I think it's a human quality to do good, expecting acknowledgement for it. And this is something Nietzsche talks about in Beyond the Genealogies of Morals, right? But when we do good, we shouldn't be focused on the fame of doing good. We're just going to be in that moment, and it just happens to be good. But conversely, when we do something bad, which we're all going to do, it's impossible not to. We're going to do good things, going to do bad things. So one, when we do good things, don't get caught up in the fame, right? But when we do bad things, don't get caught up in the disgrace either. It seems to me that this chapter is about acknowledging our feelings, but not going overboard with them. That these two aspects, perhaps disgrace and fame, are the extremes, instead of living with our emotions, acknowledging them, and just letting them be. Just like a man who goes to a funeral, he cries 3 times and then he leaves. He's not doing it for fame. He's not going to be disgraced by it. He's just there.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you for your translation. But I'd like to point is, if you base on the Chinese word, he didn't say disgrace, only say punishment.
Yes, but punishment can be from ourselves too.
Yeah. You can say
beating ourselves up.
Yeah, self-inflict punishment. So you can say so. Just to be honest, the text is not very clear, and since this chapter is very short, so I didn't skip any text. Every single word is here. So there's no skipping. So that's the word it is. So I think that's great, and that's the beautiful part of this reading, because Dao De Jing is only have a 5,000 character. It's too brief, so that's too much room to interpret. And this one is different, just like Nietzsche's writing. Beautiful language. In the Chinese, if you read it, it's very beautiful language. And even, I believe, even translate to English, it's beautiful. Okay, so that's give you a lot of room to interpret. We have a Carly and CK, then Joe. Carly, please.
Thank you. Really great discussion here today. I really appreciate the input. Trevor, well said. Joe, I wanted to go back to your point with the idea of things being based on reason and asking for, I think CK mentioned the prescriptive nature of this chapter. And that's why it's important, is that it helps us prescribe how to live. But it is kind of vague insofar as, is it a principle? It's not that linear or polarized of there is good and there is bad. It is more amorphous, that as a person living in a world that good and bad things will happen, it seems to me to be more situational. And the fact that an overall principle would be striving the natural path and living virtuously and living moderately and doing, what is a good thing to do, not just for gain or fame, but not always to avoid penalty either. I think that word penalty is interesting, Jason, that it wasn't about, because Trevor, you had mentioned that it's about punishment, but penalty could be any number of things too, not just a societal penalty or going against what is traditionally thought is good or bad. And it's not about necessarily just getting caught. I think penalties can be consequences of behaviors, irrespective of if anybody else is involved or not too. But doing that natural path in the middle way, to me, doesn't seem like it's just a linear thing, is that it kind of flows between other things and it's relative. And therefore, some of it can be situational insofar as when one urinates in public, it might be appropriate and it might have other meanings why that would be or not. But yeah, let's not make a habit out of doing things just to be nonconformist or go against society. But I also appreciate your coupling of the idea of Nietzsche's philosophies and Spinoza and the Stoics and that which is, what was it? I guess kind of going with things that don't always have the backing of the society in a whole. And that can be difficult. That's hard.
Yeah,
I lost
you.
my things.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just want to mention, I haven't read this one. I should cover this one because personally, I disagree on this translation. So look, guys, a lot of people read this one as always pursue the middle way. Okay, that's Feng You Lan's translation, and probably most interpreters today, including Chinese, also read this way. But I will explain this one. So because personally, I don't see that's the way, the right way to interpret. Okay, just CK and Joe.
Oh, I just want to say that I find Trevor's explanation and his view of Zhuang Tzu very interesting, and I congratulate him for reaching that kind of enlightened state of understanding. And I think Zhuang Tzu will be very proud of you, Trevor. I would like to confer you officially from me, expert on Zhuang Tzu.
He achieved the fame. That's not Zhuang Tzu. Trevor become the tall puppy. So, Joseph.
Well, I just want to respond to that quickly, if I may, Jason. I thank you, but I didn't say that for fame or penalty. I just was presenting, and I said it might be wrong too. It well may be. Just a different way that I read it. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, but I like it. That's very good. I mean, it's a great exposition of these chapters. Your view of this chapter, which is different.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Okay, Joe and the Mandarin. Joe, please.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think that it is absolutely kind of managing. It's a little bit more nuanced where there aren't principles. But just because you have principle doesn't make a system linear.
Yeah.
There are situations that it depends within those principles. So that's if you have a just a thing that you're striving for doesn't necessarily mean it's that you have to do it a certain way. That's dogma, and that's deontological in nature. So that's where you have a set of rules that are absolute. And so it's different than having a set of axioms for which you then manage yourself towards, which would be striving, as Carly had suggested. But that idea of also this idea of managing ourselves to the middle way, I find it to be interesting always. Yes, it's kind of managing your emotions. You're not allowing yourself to, become, too humble or too prideful. And I think that that's an interesting way of approaching it. But I think that it's also just, having a strike price, so to speak, is a little bit been a challenge. I think sometimes, kind of exactly knowing where that balance is sometimes is a little bit more of a challenge for me personally. That's why principles are helpful in the sense that you can measure yourself against something. Now you're using it with reason, but you're just measuring it against some fundamental truth in a way. So anyway, that's just my thought.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Because I heard a lot of middle way, something, but I really want to talk about this one later because I think it's too confusion thinking. So, but anyway, that's just my opinion. But I will have time to talk about this. Let's go to Madeline. You still have something to say?
I think I'm going to hold off. I'm most interested in the last sentence of this chapter.
Okay, great.
And,
then I give you the first part.
And what it's even doing in this chapter.
Okay, yeah, I think that's exactly I want to talk about, and because I have been thinking about this one, I should not say for over 10 years, but I should say this one has puzzled me for a long time. And I remember a long time ago, Pin made a presentation on this chapter, and he mentioned of this one, and it's a puzzle. And I think I understand better today, right? Because the reading in different philosophy, especially Indian philosophy. So let me read Feng You Lan's translation, and that probably also the most interpreter, Western or Chinese interpretation on this one. Okay, always pursue the middle course. These are the ways to preserve our body, to maintain our life, to support our parent, to complete our term of year. So the last part is no problem, right? That's all we want to do. Okay, as a person, doesn't matter what kind of person you are, you always want to preserve your body, be healthy. You want to maintain our life. You don't want hungry, suffering. You want to support your parents because that's the basic right or obligation. Take care of your parent, complete your life. You don't live forever, but to a certain age, you don't want to die at 50, 40, but 80 something, 100, perfect. So that's not the problem. Chinese also, that's fine. 可以保身，可以全生，可以养亲，可以近年。Okay, no problem. First line, always pursue the middle course. Chinese say 圆都以为经. I don't know. CK know Chinese. I don't know who else know Chinese. Okay. How come this one become pursue the middle way? That's no zong, nothing on that. All the words here, du, jing, that's Chinese medicine. Talking about channel. If you want to look at this one, it's talk about this. Talk about your channel. Okay, if you're familiar with Chinese medicine, the body, you have the certain acupuncture point. That's the part he's talking about. 圆都以为经. So, of course, you can talk about because the jing, the channel is on your center of body. So you say, follow the center way, the middle way. But I think that's imposed Confucian thinking, so-called the middle, the doctrine of the mean, okay, in this philosophy. So that's why I start to disagree the middle course. So I think that he probably actually talk about the Chinese medicine. Okay, he talk about following the major channel of your body, talking about sitting and the meditation, talking about practicing qi, or you want to call qi gong, the breathing. Okay. And then when he talk about follow the middle course, he's talking about your breathing, or you want to call it the qi, is in the middle course. But that's my interpretation today. Okay, I think that's he talking about. And that make perfect sense, if you compare to Bhagavad Gita. In just brief idea on Bhagavad Gita, we talk about the duty, talking about the your obligation and the karma yoga. But in chapter 6, right, if you read it, it inserts something very similar, talking about moral and what you need to do. He also, in Bhagavad Gita, also talking about fix himself, that means yourself, pure spot, firm seed. What are you talking about? He's not talking about metaphor. Krishna is not talking about metaphor. He talking about something real, right? You talk about cover with cushy grass on the deer skin and the clothes. He talking about like a straight line and motionless, fixing eye on the tip of nose, don't looking around. So he talk about meditation, okay, meditation, right? So our Western philosophy probably lost on this kind of thing. So when you talk about moral, what you need to do, it also includes your own body. You should do this one. And it's not surprise if you remember one of the best-selling book in 2018, okay, the so-called the 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. Okay, it's a 12th rule, right? What's the number one? Stand up straight with your shoulders back. Okay, I didn't read the book. I listened to his speech, his lecture on that. He talked about number one, you should stand up because that's you feel confident. That's everything starts here. So if I put all this together and I go back to interpret this one, I see there's no reason you're talking about the follow the middle way. I think it's totally misleading. Okay, I think that means you should, just like Jordan Peterson talk about, you should stand straight, focus, and then good posture, and you will feel confident. Then you will feel I'm living this work fine. I think that he's talking about this one. Zhuang Zi is talking about this one, and I have more evidence since I changed my mind to read this way. And I will find out in the next story when he talk about the so-called the Cook Ting. I pay attention to the word. Zhuang Zi is talking about the biology, talking about the physical body. I think he's talking about this one. But that's just my interpretation today. Okay, because if you asked me last year, I probably will agree on pursue middle course. But today I see this word means injustice straight. And I check. It reminds me long time ago, I listened a lecture from the National Taiwan University. She is talking about Zhuang Zi. But I don't like her talking because everything she talk about is tie Zhuang Zi to religious, to health. Okay, so I don't read this word. But when I think back today, I think I may not still agree with her, but she may not be totally wrong. Zhuang Zi do have a lot of flavor on the taking your body. When I say taking your body, I'm talking about really taking your physical body. We have Mark and Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Can you remind me real quick, when was the Zhuang Tzu written? Like about what year?
Excuse me?
Can you remind me real quick about what year was the Zhuang Tzu written?
Zhuang Zi is lived on about the 3rd century BC.
Okay, great. Yeah.
But
So,
he should be in the same time as Mencius.
right.
They never mention each other.
So one thing I'd just like to mention for context is that, like, we here in, well, I live in the United States. I don't know where everyone else lives, but outside of ancient China, there's been thousands of years of philosophical conceptions they kind of revolve around these abstractions of good and evil, which sometimes philosophically are called Manichaeism. And so it's easy when reading something from 300 BC to not understand that this is before the Islamic influence on China. This is before the Christian influence on China. It's probably even before, there wasn't a very significant Zoroastrian influence, but there was a little bit. So this is written in a context where these ideas, which so permeate like moral philosophy in modern society, these ideas of good and evil as kind of being the axioms around organizing one's life, they don't exist in that same sense. And I really like Jason's interpretation here. I have a slightly different translation from the Chinese Text Project, which I want to read, and I think it backs up pretty much what Jason is saying. So in the Chinese Text Project, what the last sentence reads is, in accordance with the central element of our nature is the regular way to preserve the body, to maintain the life, to nourish our parents, and to complete our term of years. So it says the central element of our nature is the way that they translate it. Yeah, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Yeah, especially for Mark, I think you and I years ago we talked about Yang Zhu, right? I think you know him, right? So that's one theory is talking about actually Yang Zhu is Zhuang Zi. Okay. Just for your reference.
Are you saying that they're the same person or that they're similar?
Same person.
Oh,
That's
really?
one scholar talk about this one, but of course, in academic, everybody hate him talk about this. So they think that's a selfish person. How can you relate it? Not only related, it's the same person. Okay, he has
interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
can you send me a link to that? I'd be really interested in reading that.
Let me find it. I read this one, and when I read through carefully, it's not totally. For example, one thing you can say, if you read Mencius criticized Yang Zhu a lot, but he never criticized Zhuang Zi. Sounds like he never heard about him. So that's one of the evidence. He could be the same person as Zhuang Zi.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a different subject. Joe, please.
Yeah, no, just really briefly, I think I'm kind of seeing where maintain our life, to support parents and to complete our terms. It seems like there's both an internal and external approach. It's so that's like you're looking internally first to act out externally. And there's a physical aspect we're talking about here, but I think that I really appreciate that when you're linking it to the Bhagavad Gita. Because when you're looking at the Bhagavad Gita, you're looking at the self, and then you're looking at, your Atman, essentially, and then how you interact with the world, because that actually drives how you interact with the, the rest of seeing the God in everyone else. So I think that from that perspective, there is that relationship. It's just, it's not as clear as to how that is executed, but I do see the similarities, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Darlene, please.
Will be on so soon. So I got into kind of an accidental disagreement in one of my Stoic groups, because I was saying that it's easier to be balanced if we're doing things on the outside, like with our body, our exercise, raising our eyebrows up, putting our arms out to the side, on both sides, and stretching to balance our bodies physically, that would change our biochemistry, and then that would then lead to the biochemicals being happy, biochemistry going on, and then being able to be more approach things when we're thinking about things in our brain in a more secure, balanced way. And the Stoic person was like, you can't always control what's on your body. Everything starts in the brain. You have to start with being balanced with, your thought processes and what you're thinking in your brain. So he was totally going from in to out, inside in the brain and then going out to the body. And I was totally going from it's easier to control your body than what's going on in your brain. So it's easier to control what you're doing with your body, and then go from out to in. I had to just sort of be quiet because he was in charge of the meeting.
Boring. Yeah. So we all have a different opinion, and then actually, just like I said, even my opinion changed. So, okay. So let's move on. Let's talk about the first. We have a 4 story short, and the first one is a little bit longer, and the last 3 will be short. So let's go to the most famous story and the so-called the skill cook, but most of the English translation will change as a Cook Ting, right? I just have to say it's not possible. His last name is Cook Ting. Hao Ting actually in Chinese means kitchen guy. Okay, Ting means a blue color label. Okay, so the gardener called Yuan Ding, garden Ding. Okay, not gardener Ding. That means the garden guy. Okay, so for the person who carry the food, the thing for you, the strong guy, we call Zhuang Ding, not strong guy Ding. Okay, so but anyway, that's not big deal. So let's start this writing. I just will say the description in Chinese is very beautiful, and that's why if you don't read as a philosophy, you can totally read as a literature. So, okay. So Prince Wen Hui, okay. Wen Hui, if you were here 2 weeks ago, Huang is talking about mentions, right? The first chapter of the first sentence is mentions visit the King Hui of Liang, okay. That's the same person. Basics, they all use we don't know it's true or not true in mentions, okay? Mentions could be true, but for sure, I will say 99.9% of the story in Zhuang Zi is not true. Zhuang Zi created, okay? So he used this person, Prince Hui, Wen Hui, okay, basics, the person he was, the reason he used this guy is he's the most powerful king of the most powerful state during that time. Okay, so Prince Wen Hui, the cook, was cutting up bullock. Every blow of his hand, every heave of his shoulder, every treat of his foot, every thrust of his knee, every sound of the rendering flesh, and every note of the movement of the chopper were in perfect harmony. Rhythmical like the dance of mulberry grove, and simultaneous like the chord of the qin shou, jing shou. Okay, so this mulberry grove and the qin shou would be the during the time the most popular, beautiful dance and music. That's why he used this one for metaphor. So the prince said, admirable that your art should become so perfect. Okay, so we call him this one as art. I think art is in the sense of technique. Okay, just like in Greek, we call it technique. So continue. The cook laid down his chopper and replied. Okay, so the following is the cook, the skillful cook, talk to the prince. What your servant, myself, love is Tao. Okay, he is a cook. Okay, but he said he really love is Tao. Okay, so that's put this way, which is more advanced than art. Okay, so it's not just art or technique, it's Tao. When I first began to cut up bullock, what I saw was simply whole bullocks. After 3 years practice, I saw no more bullocks as wholes. At present, I work with my mind. He used his mind, okay, but not with my eyes. The function of my senses stop. He doesn't use the outer sensation, okay? My spirit dominant, use spirit, use mind, okay, like a third eye. following the natural vein. Okay, remember this word, following the natural vein. That's the translation. I will explain later. My chapter slides through the great cavities, slides through the great opening, taking advantage of what is already there. I did not attempt the central vein and their branches and the connectives between flesh and the bone, not to mention the great bones. So I like to mention here is a few words like this here, okay? They translate as between bones, cavity, muscle and the bone, and the tendon and the muscle. So the words Zhuang Zi used, that's why I tie back to the so-called between the middle course, because in this text, Zhuang Zi used a lot of physiological or anatomical term, right? Okay, about the ox's body. Okay, so he's really talking about the body. So go back to this word. He followed the natural vein. Okay, in Chinese called Tian Li. Okay, so Tian means nature, also means heaven. Li originally means the line, okay, the pattern of jade, but here it also means the muscle fiber. So the skillful cook talking about his knife follow the natural vein, Tian Li. He talking about follow the natural muscle fiber, so he can easily cut. But the same word, okay, also means heavenly principle. If you read in Confucius' eye, that's natural principle. So this one will be very interesting. Metaphor, or you want to take a metaphor, or you talk about it real. He talk about his knife follow the fiber of muscle, but exactly the same word you can read as the natural principle. If you are Confucian, or you are reading as a Taoism, you are the natural way, which is the natural way. You will say, oh, that's a Taoism. So you can see that's the three there. So first layer is just physically, I follow the natural fiber. Second, you can say that's the natural way, okay, as a Taoism. Or you're talking about in the Confucian scholar, especially Neo-Confucianism in the Song dynasty, that's the heavenly principle, okay? That's moral, the principle you need to follow. So that's the interest part on this text. Then the cook continued to talk. Okay. He said, a good cook changes his chopper once a year because he cuts. An ordinary cook changes his chopper once a month because he hacks. Now, my chopper has been in use for 19 years. It cuts up several thousand bullocks, yet its edge is as sharp as it just come out the wet stone. At the joint, there are always interstices, and the edge of the chopper is without thickness. Remember the words. The chopper is without thickness. If we insert that, what is without thickness into an interstice, okay, there is certainly plenty of room for it to move along. Okay, remember the highlight sentence here. Nevertheless, when I come to a complicated joint and see that there will be some difficulty, I proceed anxiously and with caution. I fix my eyes on it, I move slowly, then by a very gentle movement of my chopper, the part is quickly separated and yield like earth crumbling to the ground. Okay, so he described how he cut it. I'd like to enter these two words that's become a famous common Chinese saying. Okay, the thickness. Here we translate as which is without thickness into an interstice. Okay, But if you translate word by word means something seeklessness into some interstice, some small space. And the situation will be, you will feel like you have plenty of room for your blade to move along because the blade has no thickness. So that's the concept here. So finally, the skilled cook continued. Then standing with the chopper in my hand, I look all around and with an air of triumph and satisfaction. Then I wipe my chopper and put it in its stick, in its sheath. So the most interesting is the answer from the prince, right? He said, excellent. From the words of this cook, I learned the way of cultivation life. So when he see this performance, he not say, okay, let's go for party or have a steak. Okay, but he's talking about, he's not talking about excellent skill. He's talking about, I learned from you the cultivation of life. Okay, so come with the question, right? Why did the prince learn about the way of cultivation of life from the butchering performance? Okay, so I come with a few answers, right? That's also the key word there, right? Number one, the skillfulness. That's the way we live. Mindfulness. Remember the skillful cook talk about he focused, not use eye, not use sensation, he use his mind. He also talk about the harmony, right? His movement is smooth, okay? Like dance, like music, it's harmony. That's another way to do it. Number four, nature way, 天理, okay? We're talking about the following the nature way, right? Another thing talk about is effortlessness, right? It's just smooth, avoid all the resistance. So here, that's a time we can share. How do you think, okay, why the prince learned the cultivation of life from this performance, right? So anyone have anything want to share, or how do you think? Or you can just say which one you agree. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so Fred haven't speak yet. So let's go Fred, CK, and Joe. Okay, Fred, please.
I've never butchered a bullock before, but I have cleaned a lot of fish, and I've deboned chicken and a few other things. And I really appreciate this story for that reason. One thing that's perhaps hidden here or unstated, but probably understood, is that this particular example, and maybe this applies in general as well, is very much a feel thing. It's not a matter of instruction. Like your teacher can't say, step 1, do this, step 2, do that, step 3, don't do this. It's really feel, and it's experience that no matter who teaches you, you're not going to clean the fish efficiently and effectively first couple of times. So what you need is a very sharp knife, and you need some experience in doing it. So I find that interesting, and I think it relates back to the limits of knowledge here as well, because he starts off this chapter by saying that he speaks to knowledge, there is no limit. With what is limited, to pursue what is unlimited is a perilous thing. When knowing this, we still seek to increase our knowledge, the peril cannot be averted. So there's effectively a danger to pursuing knowledge beyond its finite, limited context. And that I find interesting, because this might very well just come right out of Kant's critique of pure reason, which is primarily about the limits of reason and what we can know. And the transcendental illusion in Kant is really a restatement of this second line. When knowing this, we still seek to increase our knowledge, the peril cannot be averted. And Kant says, even if we know it, we're still going to pursue a transcendental illusion by going beyond our knowledge. So I wonder how this example here factors into the limits of knowledge, because part of cultivating life from this example is learning from this experienced butcher. So that's part of it. And that, to that extent, it's knowledge. But the example itself and the earlier point that he made speaks to the limits of knowledge.
Mhm.
And so I wonder how that factors into it.
Okay, very good point. But I think that's just my opinion, you know. So that's why skillfulness should not be the answer, because you probably need more knowledge, need more practice, and then to improve, which is contradict, okay, different than the first principle we're talking about. The knowledge is, and so you can keep practice, become more skillful, become unlimited. So Qin Hui should not learn this one by his skillfulness as a cultivation of life. That's a Confucius would do, not Taoism would do. That's just my opinion. Yeah. So let's hear some. Anyone have? How do you think about this story? CK, please.
What I get from this story and what King Hui, what I think King Hui means by he learns the way of cultivating life is that this story teaches the king and teaches me as well not to go against the grain in life.
Mm-hmm.
You should go with the grain and not against the grain. And if you go with the grain and with the flow of whatever energy or the path or the processes, if you go with it rather than against it, your life will become simpler and you will not have to waste energy confronting obstacles that you don't need, which is why Pao Ting this was able to perfect his skill because he didn't go against the grain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I got from this.
So you probably choose number 5.
Yes, because I'm a rather lazy person. I want to have an easy life.
I think we are in the same page. You know, I'm seeing the prince probably not look at the when you say excellent, he probably not talking to the cook. He talking to the knife. You say you move excellent. You never touch anything difficult. So it goes through, you know, nicely. Preserve your sharpness through your life for 19 years. So probably that's what the prince talking about. At least that's what I'm thinking. You know, he probably never pay attention who is speaking. He look at the knife because it's the knife is sharp. That's so thin, so he can go through all the space and easily without any resistance. So he never damaged his body. So I think probably that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective.
Hardy, please.
Hello. Okay. Thanks for that. I have a few questions, actually. I noticed, again, maybe a connection between different philosophies about the awareness and coming upon a complicated joint, seeing that as something that you have to anticipate the difficulty of, and then slow down, focus, and proceed with caution in order to resolve that particular problem. I love the way that this reads. It is simple, but it is beautiful. The natural way, how it allows problems to be solved without trouble to our mind. And that by doing so, we actually do that by taking advantage of what is already there in this Taoism aspect. The question I had was about the use of the word skilled, that the skilled is where he gets to after he applies his experience to develop whatever talent he had and practice and apply that over time, then becomes skilled. And that then changes from just a skill into an art. And that's what it sounds like that the prince is enamored with, is that cutting versus hacking is by combining the harmony of using the mind and then actually using, or rather using the physical things and using the mind and combining those together into an art over time by experience, where it is recognition and awareness. I forgot my other question, so I'm going to come back around when I find it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning about the skillfulness, because Zhuang Tzu's skillfulness should be taken carefully. Okay, so I think that we will not discuss further on this one, but important is skilllessness. Okay, so he consider the usefulness of uselessness. Okay, so skillful and useful. Okay, that's the concept important in Zhuang Tzu, but we're not going to discuss here. But in the next chapter, chapter 4, when they talk about the secular world, the human world, okay, we will talk about this kind of concept. Okay, how to be skillfulness, usefulness, and uselessness. Okay, we have Travel and Joe.
I love this conversation. I really liked what CK was saying and what Carly just said as well. It makes me think about, well, I was formulating an idea about washing dishes, but it's not fully formed. So I'll leave that away and go with my original comment. And it is to loop us back to the translator's edition on the pheasant that we see later, who is healthy in its marshes, and because it's healthy, doesn't even realize that it forgets all about health. And then he adds, freedom of the spirit is essential to the cultivation of life. And so I was thinking about this metaphor about that, the cook with the knife, right? And the knife has become an extension of himself. And it's not that and here's the deal, other cooks can just hack through the meat, right? And but the knife is going to blunt, and they're going to have to get a new knife all the time, right? And so I'm thinking about with the ruler, he says, I learned a way of cultivating life, right? Is I can act a couple of different ways, right? And when I with my knife, I approach disagreements, or I approach an obstacle, I can hack right through it, right? I can eliminate it, I can destroy it, but it's going to ultimately hurt me. Or I can observe it, sort of, feel it with my knife and find a way around it, right? I don't have to hack at it, I don't have to destroy it, but I can actually move with it. And so I find what's interesting in this piece, and I'm really going to be interested to see how this is going to get woven into other chapters, is you allow the space for the obstacles, for the other textures, and you find spaces to maneuver them. And that's what allows for a good life, not just hacking parts that we don't like out, or throwing books out of libraries, for example, which is something that we see happening in the States right now, but maybe working with it to grow.
All right, thank you, Travel. Okay, so let's go to Joe and DLJ. Then I'm going to move on for another 3 short stories. So Joe, please.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I see the use of the metaphor, as the beauty of it, as far as the natural progression of actually how the cuts are made and things along those lines. But I think that it's important not to lose the meaning behind the metaphor and how it can play out in real life. And I think it's essentially what is our natural way. It's the category that I think about the most. Whenever you're taking on a task, and I think Fred was actually getting to this, is whenever you're taking on any task, could be a fish, could be a bull in this particular instance, that it's about the journey and finding out who you are in that process. It's about the internal process that you're figuring out, the transformations that can take place, the emotions that you feel during that process. Yes, there's a natural way of doing things, but it's about understanding yourself in that process, and then from there you can understand things like your true nature, and you can understand things like your emotions, so that you can have certain controls, if you will, in place, so that you don't necessarily get too emotional. So about something too high or too low. So I think that's, whenever we're doing something, trying a task that's new to us or whatever it may be, I think it's about the internal processes that we go through in the self-evaluation, and then everything else is, what we do externally. And that's what is our true nature that we're kind of discovering in that process.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. DLJ, please.
Oh, yeah. Is my sound working?
Yeah, please. Great.
Yeah, so there's a difference between cultivation of life for the individual and what the prince, soon to be king, should actually be thinking about, which is the prosperity for the whole community. So cultivating life for all. So he should actually be, the lessons he should be learning or thinking about is how do I ensure that there's grain producers so we can produce ox, and there's ox farmers who can look after the ox, and there's the butcher and the knife maker and the knife sharpener industry. We need to cultivate a knife sharpening industry, and then a food standards agency. And then also the education for the next generation. And his job, of course, is the art of delegation, which is not necessarily the natural way.
Well, yeah, thank you for bringing up this one. So I just want to remind everyone, this chapter, the king is act as individual. Okay, you can disagree, that's fine, but I just have to. And if we're looking for how to live in this society, that'll be in the chapter 4. Okay, in that chapter 4, we'll talk about how to live in this society. Okay, so that's a different story. And then in chapter 7, so-called the philosopher king, which is talking about as a king. Okay, what kind of king you should behave. So DLJ's comment was perfect fit in chapter 7, because at that time, well, Zhuang Zi didn't write the same story, but if this story show in chapter 7, then Qin Hui should not learn the cultivation of life. He should learn is political, how to rule the people. And I can tell now, and he will talk about the lesson is not cultivation of life, is wu wei, so-called non-action. So, DLJ, I hope I answer your question.
Thank you, yes.
Because we are in the wrong chapter. So here's a 3 short story. I probably will skip the first one, which is not that important. Basically talk about there's a 1 foot man and there's a wow, how can you, we talk about balance, right? How can he balance so well 1 foot? Because he called, his name is master of the right. He has no left foot. Okay, so he balanced so well, just 1 foot, because naturally he balances well. 2 foot, he cannot walk. So he perfect in 1 foot. So that's one thing. But I want to talk about is this one, since Travel mentioned this one. And I like this one a lot. And I do have a different interpretation than the translator, and I think it's the way we read this. The pheasant of the marshes get a peck once in 10 steps, a drink once in 100, yet it does not want to be fed in a cage. I think we understand this part, right? The last part, 神虽亡不善也. And the translation in the marshes, the spirit is healthy and consequently. Yeah, it's right, but I prefer this way. I think this word is mistaken of this word, wang. So basically, he's talking about when the birds in the cage, it is healthy. Wang means healthy, prosperous. So the birds in the cage is healthy, but it's not good because he lost the freedom. That's my interpretation, but which is not much different than other interpreter. But I think here he's talking about freedom is more important than the health, even before he talk about health. So cultivation of life also include freedom. Then the next story, he talked about the death of Lao Tzu. That's why I mentioned about Lao Tzu. And I think someone asked about, does Zhuang Zi mention about Lao Tzu here? Yes, he mentioned, but again, we don't believe this story is true because it's Zhuang Zi talk about this story. And then he talked about when Lao Tzu, actually it's interesting, the word he used is Lao Dan, okay? Lao Dan is his name. You know, in the traditional Chinese, you don't call people's given name, okay? It's kind of disrespect. So here, the writing is calling the founder of Taoism master, okay? He didn't call him Lao Tzu, okay? Because that's translation, translated as Lao Tzu, but in the original writing called Lao Dan, that's his name, okay? He died, okay? John Smith died, like this symbol. Okay, so totally neutral description. When Lao Tzu died, Qin Shi went to mourn over him. He uttered 3 years and went out. A disciple asked him, saying, "Were you not a friend of the master?" "Yes, I was," replied Qin Shi. "If so, it is proper to offer your mourning merely in the way you have done." "Yes," said Qin Shi. "At first, I thought the other mourner were his men, his disciple. Now I know they are not, because his disciple will not be like this. When I went in to mourn, there were old people weeping as if for the loss of their children, and the young one as if that of their mother. These people assembled here, utter words, and drop tears, which are not to be expected. This is, here is important. This is to violate the principle of nature. Okay, his principle of nature is different than Confucius' principle of nature, right? And increase the emotion of man, forgetting what we have received from nature. This was called, and the ancient, the penalty of violation the principle of nature. When the master came, it was because he had occasion to be born. When he went, he simply followed the natural course. Those who are quiet at the proper occasion follow the natural course cannot be affected by sorrow or joy. They were considered by the ancient means by good people, as the men of God, and they who were released from bondage. So, 解玄. So basically, this person is talking about who cries 3 times. He just remember why he cried. He uttered 3 years remember disgrace, right? He see the master die. Okay, it's totally nature, so it's nothing to said about, nothing to that. But he still went there. He yelled three times. Why? Why he can just totally quiet and laughing, right? Because that's another way to do it, because it's nothing. So, but he didn't do it. Remember, you should avoid disgrace, right? So he do something, okay, following the most people conventional doing. But he didn't see that's the point to cry like you lost your father or cry like you lost your son. It just, you say he died, okay, we go there, people cry, I cry, okay, then I walk away. Nothing emotional, okay? That's what he is talking about. And then he talking about that's the nature way. The emotion, including joy and the sorrow, it's a violation. You will increase the human bondage on that. So in this case, he is talking about human bondage, right? So I think that I have another thing to talk about, but I probably save for the final, because that's another important part of Zhuang Zi's reading, at least to the translator, Feng You Lan, and myself also read the same way, because the emotion a lot of time increase the human bondage. And if you see this word, you see this guy, when he see his master die, he sees it as nature way. When the time comes, die, that's nothing. So that's the word. That's nothing to feel sorry about this. There's nothing to sad, nothing to be happy. So how do you pursue happiness? You have to get out of this human bondage. And that's why the translator and myself also totally agree on Spinoza's ethics, right? If you talk about Spinoza's ethics, Spinoza is talking about this spin. I'm not saying Spinoza have the same philosophy as Zhuang Zi, which is very different. But in this point, they see this word same way as Zhuang Zi seeing this word, which is deterministic word. Okay, there's nothing you can do about it. And he called the human bondage. You had emotion. I think in his books, part 3, Spinoza part 3, talk about psychology and the joy, the sorrow. All this one increase the human bondage. So you have to use intelligence to control your psychology, your emotion, so you can be free from this bondage. And that's what he called blessedness, and he called it virtue. That's the way we should live. And in this sense, I see Zhuang Zi has the same concept as Spinoza's concept. And then I think we will talk about this one more detail when we finish all 7 chapters, because Feng You Lan have a specific writing about Spinoza and Zhuang Zi's concept about the human bondage. And that's the part, it presents here at the death of Lao Tzu. So I will stop here for a few discussion, and then I will move on for the last part, which is immortality, which is also interesting. Trevor, please.
Yeah, I think words get slippery, and I think we're in agreement, but we might be in disagreement, and that's okay too. When I read this, and
I mean the death of Lao Tzu.
I beg your pardon?
You read this page, right? The death.
Yes, and I've been thinking about it quite a bit. And the first thing is, when I first read it, especially at the end, I thought the translator was actually coming out against emotion. And as I've lived with it a little bit, I think I misread that. And in the context of the whole death of Lao Tzu, we have someone who feels emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
He feels emotion. So emotions aren't bad. And I think that's what you were saying. Emotions aren't bad. Yes. We feel sad, we cry. We're happy, we laugh. We handle Sartre in a different meeting. We get we pull our hair out, right? This is just an example, right? It's what we do with emotions, right? And so I think what he's getting at in this section is building, making more of our emotions than what we really feel, increasing them. We feel happy, so we want to make it ecstatic, right? Or we feel sad, and so we want to make dirges. And so I thought there were a couple of things. Those who are quiet at the proper occasion and follow the natural course cannot be affected by sorrow or joy. It's not that they won't feel sorrow or joy, but they won't allow those feelings to dictate their whole being. And so this is where we get the proper amount, or even where I hear a little echo of Buddhism come in, where there is attachment, there is bondage. We can latch onto the feeling and somehow allow our feeling to say, this is who we are. And in fact, no, we're just feeling this emotion. And so we go to the funeral, we cry 3 times, right? We have 3 yells, and then we move on, right? That's the person who is authentic in their feelings. They're not just performing something. And so I think that's
the first, okay, just I want to make sure I understand. So you said, okay, Trouble, you said the person who utters 3 yells is wrong. Okay.
No. The person who utters the 3 yells is right. They come to the funeral, they yell out 3 times, right? That's their emotion.
Oh, I got you.
But they're not carried away with it. Everybody else is like performing an emotion. This person is really, look, I'm not making it more than it is. I'm not making it less than it is. I'm living with the sorrow of reality, which is people die, right? I'm sorry he's gone, but I'm not going to make it into a theatric, which would then just keeps us locked in something else. So I just want to make a distinction between emotions are real and those are okay, and we can express them. But I think what he's getting at is that attachment to them or making them more than what they are.
Okay, so you said that the first time you read it, you think it's just like what I said. And then you second time read it, you think it should have your...
No, I'm just not clear. So the first time I read it, I absolutely loved what...
the Feng You Lan, the translator.
I loved what Lao Tzu was saying. Not Lao Tzu, but Zhuang Tzu was saying. I loved what Xiang is saying. I misunderstood what the translator was saying because he says Spinoza called human bondage, which is caused by the increase of human emotions. I missed that increase. I thought he was saying that human emotions are human bondage. I think what the human bondage is when we go beyond what we're feeling, like the other people were doing at the funeral.
That's interesting, okay. But so look guys, we read the same text, we have the different, I'm not talking about the original text, I'm talking about the Feng You Lan and talking about the Spinoza. We probably have a different understanding on what Feng You Lan talking about the Spinoza, and probably we have a different understanding on Spinoza also, because to me is Spinoza is talking about the psychology, the emotion, which will cause the problem, and he called this one human bondage. We should use our intelligent reason to control the emotion, okay? So we will be free from human bondage. That's my understanding, and which will be similar to what this story talking about. And then I think this one is even more than Spinoza. In Zhuang Zi's idea, you even should not have this emotion. So the emotion should not come out even yet, not yet, okay. I see you shake your head, so we disagree.
Well, I just think the text tells us that there is a proper, we have emotion in the text, right? So emotion is part of the human experience. To deny human emotion is to deny what makes us human. And so I don't think the text is saying emotions are bad. What I'm saying is what we do with them is what is human bondage. Because if we want to just get rid of our emotions, what are we left with? That's not a good life either.
Okay, I got your point. Yeah, let's keep our disagreement on this one. And my comment would be, Confucius will agree with you, and Zhuang Zi may not agree with you. Because when Zhuang Zi, Confucius school talking about emotion, it's very similar to like what you are talking about. Basically, you have emotion, you should let it out, but stop at the right place. That's the Confucius teaching. You have your emotion out, but stop at the proper way, so-called the doctrine of the mean. Just to a certain point, stop, will control. That's a Confucius teaching. And then Taoism teaching will be, because later story, he will talk about Zhuang Zi's wife died and Zhuang Zi started singing, dancing. And then I think in chapter 4, okay, next time, we talk about 4 Taoism sage. When their friend died, they start to singing and dancing around him. So you can say they are cold people. Okay, that's why I'm not saying I'm like these people, but that's my interpretation. But yeah, Trevor, you have anything to say? But you know, we probably have to keep our disagreement for the further.
Well, I don't think we're in a disagreement all that much, and this is what Carly said in the chat. It's just we have this line: when Lao Tzu died, Chen Shi went to mourn over him. He uttered 3 yells and went out. That's emotion, right? He's displaying some emotion. And then we have this discussion about the other people who are uttering words, dropping tears, and that's what was not expected. That's beyond. And so there's this space where he's saying, look, emotions are fine, right? Because he displayed emotion, and he tells us that. He went in, he yells 3 times.
Okay.
But it's within the bounds of what is maybe not acceptable, but it's what's true. It's not performative. That's what I get.
Okay, so our disagreement is this 3 years. It's out of emotion or just fake it. Okay, so I think we will have further to discuss on this part, because that's, it's only in the chapter 3. And the chapter 4 is a lot of things talk about the human world. And that's how you deal with people die, how to deal with other people. Here in this chapter, basically is talking about yourself. How are you going to deal with this one? Mark and Amanda.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So my question is about this Lao Tzu. So when I read this, I read it on the Chinese text project, and it just translates it as Lao Dan. And I looked at the original characters, and that's what I got too.
Yeah, that's Lao Dan. That's his name. His first name.
So do we know for certain that Lao Dan and Lao Tzu are the same person, and that the author of the Zhuang Zi thought that they were the same person?
Well, we don't know, and I also not that interested on this subject, because that's the text. People say Lao Dan and Lao it should be the same person, because according to tradition, he called Li okay, and if you know Chinese, you see these words have the kind of related to ear, because this word means you have the hair around your ear, okay, so he probably have long hair around the ear, so that's why that's his name. So I don't know, and
okay, thank you.
And for sure, I just want to mention, if when next time we will read the chapter 4, here Confucius show up, all right, and a lot of Confucius, and you have to read the Confucius as 2 roles. If Confucius is teaching somebody, he is the Taoism master, okay? So he just call him Confucius. He's a Taoism master. So if Confucius has been preached or being mentioned, that's the Confucian school of Confucius. Okay, so when you see Confucius in the next reading, you should be careful, because sometimes Confucius say something, he's teaching somebody, that's the Taoism talking, Taoism Confucius talking, Zhuang Zi himself talking. And if you say somebody, he mentioned about Confucius did this, that means he's Confucian school, Confucius or Confucian school being criticized. Okay, so that's the part. And again, none of this story has any evidence. So that's must Zhuang Zi create this one. So same as this story is a fake story. So don't take, well, you can read it seriously, but don't tell people that's the Chinese history. Madeline, please.
Well, this certainly has resonances with books 1 and 2, with everything with proportions and where you are and how big and small things appear, or how overwhelming or not overwhelming emotions can appear. It's putting me in mind actually of Cordelia, one of King Lear's 3 daughters. When his other 2 daughters said, oh, I love you more than anything in the world, father. And she said, I love you, as much as I should. And that kind of got the ball rolling for that particular tragedy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I'm going to do the final. We overtime 10 minutes. Okay, that's violate my principle, but that's fine. Okay, since we have a very productive discussion. That's the final sentence, okay, of this chapter. It talks about immortality. And I think that's interesting. And I have to point out, I believe most of translators probably do it wrong. So the translation took the finger may not be able to supply the fuel, but the fire is transmitted, and we know not when it will come to an end, right? Finger, actually, that's, if you know Chinese, actually that's a word for 子. So actually it should not be finger, it means fat, the oil. Okay. So I think that will make more sense. Okay, so basically talk about the oil may not be able to supply all fuel, but the fire itself will transmit it. So that's Zhuang Zi, or total the concept of immortality. In Zhuang Zi Taoism concept, they don't have the Christian concept or Platonic concept of the immortal soul, okay, immortality of soul. There's nothing like this. When you die, your soul die, okay, disappear, okay. But the immortality has 2 senses, okay. One is in the way of your body is immortal, okay, that's one way. Another way is just like this one. You die, but the fire distinguish, and then the fire, the fat burn out, but the fire can continue to transmit it. Okay, that's the sense of immortal, okay, immortality in Zhuang Zi's concept. So that's I think that I will stop here for today, and then let's stay for another 5 minutes if you have anything to discuss. And sorry, I last a little bit too long, but that's great. We have great discussion, and then thank you everyone. And next week we will talk about please watch the video. And there's 2 videos. I posted another new one, which is about Aurobindo. Okay, so the translator of Bhagavad Gita. And I think the interview is pretty interesting. I watch it. It's pretty. And the first one is by Hindi. It was Hindi. The first 5 minutes a little bit boring, but if you pass through this one, it's interesting to watch. See, and I start to know this much better. And the week after, I'm going to talk about. I will put the Zhuang Zi in hold for 1 week because I want to talk about another philosopher, Gong Sun Long, being considered as a logician, and then we read one short article about him, and then we come back to Zhuang Zi chapter 4. So that's it for today, and then I stay here for another 5 minutes. If you have a question, anything you want to comment, and then or want to discuss, welcome. Yeah. No.
Thank you so much, Jason. This was great.
Yeah, thank you for
Good job.
coming, and then